Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first edition of IFD Radio. I am your host, the Chief Director of IFD, Alex Massetti. I want to start off today to the extent Sorry about that. We had a problem with the feedback. All squared away now. I want to start off today's discussion in today's show talking about AC Milan. They're almost a commodity in the news nowadays. There's always a new story. There's always a new development from the AC Milan camp. And the latest is the continued bashing of coach Sinisa Mihajlovic. He's constantly on the hot seat, and that has not changed to this point, especially with some poor results against Carpi and against Hellas Verona. Yesterday, they were able to surpass and beat Sampdoria in the Coppa Italia, but there's still a lot of pressure on Mihajlovic because his team is underperforming. In fact, when you compare the first 14 games of Filippo Inzaghi's tenure last year to the first 14 games of the current coach, Mihajlovic, they're equal in points. There has been no improvement through the first 14 games of Serie A. And this is also to say, to the extent that Mihajlovic has a much better roster than Inzaghi did. Inzaghi did not have players like Carlos Bacca. He didn't have an informed Bonaventura. He didn't have, even to say, he didn't have Balotelli. He didn't have Luis Adriano. There's a lot of weapons that Inzaghi did not have. And perhaps when you look at the whole AC Milan situation, when you see the players they've brought in, the massive amount of money they've spent in the window, you begin to really question why AC Milan and the brass, such as the Berlusconis and Galliani, decided to sack Inzaghi. Of course, you can go out there and say that the last year's finish was entirely unacceptable, and you're right. You're absolutely fundamentally right. AC Milan struggled greatly last year. But this is the fourth coach in 3 seasons. We've had Allegri when he was sacked, Seedorf, Inzaghi, and now Mihajlovic. There has been no continuity. There has been no project presented by AC Milan. We don't have the slightest clue as fans as to what they are thinking. We do know that they have finally spent money. We do know that they have finally began to bring in players that could make a difference. There's plenty of Italian players, which is, in Italy becoming more and more of a premium. But yet there's still major fundamental problems with the backroom staff of AC Milan and on the pitch as well. But let's talk some positives. Let's talk some big positives. Gianluigi Donnarumma has been the biggest story, I believe, in all of Serie A this year as an individual. The young 16-year-old shot stopper has played 8 games this season. He has eclipsed the outgoing Diego Lopez, it seems. Diego Lopez has a few more minutes than Donnarumma, but there is a fundamental difference between Lopez and Gianluigi Donnarumma. In 8 games, Lopez conceded 14 goals. In 8 games, the 16-year-old Italian conceded 5. So almost for every 3 goals that Lopez conceded, Donnarumma has conceded 1. That's a huge development, not just for AC Milan, but for the Italian national team as well. The Azzurri are looking for an answer for the next generation in goal. Gianluigi Buffon may be able to go for 4 more seasons. We have no idea how long Italy's greatest ever goalkeeper is going to last. We have no idea how long he will be in between the sticks for the Azzurri. But let's say it's 4 more years for Buffon for the Italians. Gianluigi Donnarumma will be 20 years old. That's younger than Perin is now. To put that into perspective, this Gianluigi, the younger one, Donnarumma, is almost this. If I'm not mistaken, is a year younger than Buffon when he made his debut in Serie A. So we could see 20 more years of Gianluigi. If I were to be a betting man, I would say that Donnarumma will be around for a long time. He's not like Scuffe, who we saw fade out last season. There is nobody else who can come to in terms of potential and what's coming. There is not another Italian goalkeeper who offers remotely the same as Donnarumma. But sticking on AC Milan and the Azzurri, there's a few more players I want to talk about who still have a long time ahead of them, who can still offer a lot to the Italian national team for many years to come, and that is 2 new players in the form of Alessio Romagnoli and Davide Calabria. Romagnoli has played in 15 out of the 16 games this season. Calabria has made 4 appearances. Romagnoli has been a staple in the back for AC Milan. In fact, the only game that he has missed was due to suspension when he was sent off for a second yellow. He was a huge buy from Roma, as was Bertolacci. But there was a general consensus from everybody that there are only 2 central Italian defenders that can even begin to shake a limb at the golden era. The only 2 youngsters who really have a chance at eclipsing the greats like Nesta, Cannavaro, Materazzi, the ones who won the World Cup almost a decade ago. The question I have now for Romagnoli and Daniele Rugani is this: how real are they? Is this just a 1 or 2 year thing, or are we talking about the next great Italian center back pairing? Alessio Romagnoli is getting the game time. Rugani just got his foot in the door, and we're in December, but that's fine. But we're talking about some of the realest players, the biggest prospects, the realest potential that we've seen in a long time. Davide Calabria is very young. We do not know a lot about Calabria. A lot of players have came through the youth academy, the youth system, the Primavera, made a debut or 2 and called it a day. But there are a few players out there who have been able to make it to the Italian national team at some level. And I think we're going to start to see more and more of these youngsters coming through the system. Moving on to another team outfit that I think has made a lot of waves is Napoli. They cannot be understated. They cannot be refuted. They didn't spend big this past summer. They bought a few players like Vlad Siricis, Allen from Udinese, Chalobah from Chelsea. But the project was already in place. The project was already in place, and all they needed was a new coach to bring out some of the potential. Gonzalo Higuain for Napoli has been arguably the best player in Serie A this season. 14 goals in 16 games for the Argentine forward. Lorenzo Insigne, the Napolitano, the striker born in Napoli, has been incredible too. But Napoli's setup is quite different from most teams because they have an attacking trident like no other. You have players out there like Jorginho, Mertens, Amšík, who offer a lot in attack. And that's really began to put Napoli back on the radar of Italian football. And the thing that this side has missed the most the last few years is consistency, squad depth. A coach who knew how to adapt to situations in the middle of matches. Maurizio Sarri, believe it or not, has been the best signing in all of Serie A this season. He's been spectacular. They struggled in the beginning, but Sarri was right. He said it spot on that this is not my team yet. It took time, but it has begun to click. They've lost one game in all competitions since October, and that was recently against Bologna. They crushed their Europa League group. They've began to move on to setting their sights on a Scudetto run against Inter, and I'll be 100% honest with you. I think that Napoli are the closest competitor to Inter right now than any other side in Serie A. They've beaten Juventus. They've crushed Milan at the San Siro. But they've been unbelievable. They brought back Pepe Reina, which the goalkeeper has kept quite a few clean sheets. He's conceded 12 goals in 16 matches this season. But he's been pretty fundamental. Napoli were unable to reacquire Pepe Reina from Liverpool on a loan 2 years ago. He went to Bayern, and from there, he didn't get a lot of time behind Manuel Neuer. That wasn't how he wanted to continue his career. He didn't want to be a bench player. So Napoli saw an opportunity to bring Pepe Reina back, and they took it. There was a lot of concern last year with their goalkeepers. Andujar was not cutting it. Rafael Torres ACL. So Pepe Reina was a very solid pickup from the Neapolitans. Other players who joined Napoli and made a big impact have been Ilisar Hajsac. Hajsa is Albanian, and I apologize if I mispronounce his name. It's quite difficult, I assure you. Has been the answer to the aging Christian Maggio, and effectively has given Juan Zuniga out on the left no chance. Zuniga is, in fact, on the way out to either Fiorentina or Sampdoria. He will not be finishing the season with Napoli. Another player who has really blossomed under Maurizio Sarri is Kalidou Koulibaly, the Senegalese international. He's played in 12 games this season. He's been in Serie A, and he's been outstanding. Raul Albiol has looked more asserting. He's looked more like his old Real Madrid self. These are very important. I would almost like to call them new signings because they're complete 180-degree changes. They're completely different players than they were last year. And for Napoli fans, it was either the club had to buy some new players, spend big and hope for the best, or bring in a coach who could turn the tide of Napoli. And Maurizio Sarri has done exactly that. Maurizio Sarri has been the answer to a lot of prayers. And I think overall for Napoli, I think that was the best thing they could do was buy or to acquire Maurizio Sarri. Like I said, the project was already there. De Laurentiis spent a lot of money after they sold off Lavezzi and Cavani to PSG, bringing in players like Higuain, Callejon, and Raul Albiol. That was the fundamental piece of the project. 2014, 2015 was not a pleasant year for Napoli fans. They failed out. They missed in the Champions League with a crushing defeat to Athletic Bilbao, and then they were out of the Champions League. Out of the Europa League at the semifinals against, if I recall, it was Sevilla. Yeah, it was Sevilla, who went on to win the Europa League. I think the question now becomes is which title Napoli is going to win this year. They're right now in the midst of all three. They're playing Villarreal in the round of 32. They have Inter in the Coppa Italia. And they're sitting second place or tied for second place with Fiorentina in Serie A. I wouldn't say that the side is capable of winning the treble. No. I think they're a side that's going to be able to get into the UEFA Champions League by either winning Serie A or winning the Europa League. I think it's a very real chance. I think they have a very real opportunity to win a big trophy come May. Moving on to Inter Milan Internazionale, the Nerazzurri, the black and blue side of Milano. Well, what can you say? The club has been outstanding this year, both home and away. They've accrued 36 points, 19 of them which have came at home, 17 of them on the road. 22 goals scored, 9 goals conceded. So Inter's been a strong side this year. They tied Juventus in match day 8. They beat AC Milan. They lost to Fiorentina in a crushing manner, but that was a bit of a strange match. That's the only outlier they have from the season. They lost to Napoli, but they looked reassuring against both Genoa and Udinese. We're almost midway through the Serie A campaign. We're almost to the point now where, things are beginning to come more clear. The Mercato is the last wild card, I think, until the end of the season. So there's a lot that could be done in January for Inter. But I think fundamentally and structurally, the squad is complete. I think that it is their Scudetto to lose at this point. They play solid football. They play very solid football. They had 4 consecutive clean sheets from match day 10 to match day 13. And since then, now here's an even more surprising statistic for you. Since match day 8 against Juventus, Inter have conceded 4 goals. 5 goals, actually, excuse me. They've conceded 5 goals in a 9-game stretch. Spectacular. The thing that I can only begin to worry about for Inter is, of course, a second-half slump. But even then, I believe Inter Milan are a very strong side and they'll be able to come through at the end. Some good signings for them this past offseason, I think I've really came home to roost, I like Alex Telles from Galatasaray, Jason Murillo from Granada. Miranda has done well. You have players like Kondogbia who've played a lot of minutes. He's still trying to grow. I really like Perisic. I really like Melo for them. I think he's done wonders. I think Icardi, he's clearly new. I think Jovetic, Jajic. I think these are all great players for Inter, and I think it's put up a new outlook for them in the future as well. Because because they had to spend this past year. They could not afford another season down in the dumps. They went for players that could do, that they weren't like prospects. They went for solid, experienced players. And Perisic, Melo, Jajic, those are players who could deliver immediately, and that's who Inter needed. Getting rid of Kovacic was a big loss in the midfield. But Brozovic has stepped up, especially recently. He's had 2 dazzling goals the past couple weeks. Kondogbia is for the future. Gary Medel, the Pitbull, continues to roar. I really like some of these players. And I think the question becomes then if they can continue to grind out matches, because that's been their whole theme this year. Their whole theme this year has been grinding out matches and getting wins in the ugliest way possible, but they've tried and they've succeeded in that. They're my favorite to win the Scudetto. I'll be 100% honest with you. At this point in time, it is hard to go against Inter Milan to win the Scudetto. I know what you're all thinking. Juventus is back. They found their feet. They're strong. They're solid. But a lot can happen. That goes both ways. Inter could completely fall off. But I don't think time is on the side of Juventus. They have, in order right now, they're fighting in 3 competitions. Inter's got 2. They can focus on 2. And if they really wanted to, they could rest key players in the Coppa Italia matches. And then we had the final in May. Plenty of time for Inter to continue to focus solely on Serie A. Juventus have Bayern Munich in the Champions League. And then they play Inter I believe they play Inter 3 games after at the Juventus Stadium. The first leg. So, very difficult for Juventus to be able to go from playing Bayern Munich in February to switching over to a huge, crucial Scudetto deciding clash come February against Inter 3 days later. Very tough for Juventus at that point. And that's a 6-point swing. That's a big 6 points at stake for the Bianconeri and for the Nerazzurri. There's just no way around it. If Inter can continue to grind out some of these 1-0 victories, and if they can somehow pick points off of Fiorentina and Napoli, they will win the Scudetto come May. Juventus has a lot going for them as well, but I think it's important to look at the road ahead for Juventus and knowing they have to fight. They have big games now in all competitions. You got Lazio in the quarterfinal of the Coppa Italia. You got the Champions League looming in February. In February, Juventus have more than just Inter to worry about. They got a tough trip away to Bologna. They got a tough trip to Frosinone, which people will, bash me, I'm sure, for calling it a tough trip to Frosinone. But these small clubs at home against the big sides come out swinging. You got Napoli in the middle of all this as well. So February is going to be a big month. The new year doesn't get difficult to the end of the month when they face Roma at home on match day 21. So Juventus has their hands, they have all of it to do. The bulk of this season is going to be decided, I believe, before match day 30, because after match day 30, Juventus is going to have to hope that that Inter gets some bad ones, to get some bad results. I think you have to set yourself up to get to match day 30 because Juventus play AC Milan at the San Siro. They play Fiorentina in Florence, and they face Lazio at home. If Juventus are able to do a 5th straight Scudetto, it would be incredible. It would be a heck of a feat, considering how poorly the side started off. So there's a lot for Juventus to worry about heading into the new year. Do you buy a few new players who are possibly cup tied to help out in the Serie A campaign? Possibly. I read something the other day about Oscar heading to Juventus. And I didn't quite understand why. What would Juventus need from Oscar? A new trequartista? They've already put a lot into Hernanes. They've already put a lot into Pereira. They redeemed, I believe, last season. Paid about 18 million euro for Roberto Pereira. So they want to sign a big trequartista in front of Pogba, Khedira, Marchisio to rebuild the midfield, which I believe last year was the best in the world. That would be a bit questionable. The beauty of this campaign is while I have my favorites and while I have, my predictions, is that this campaign is this Serie A season is completely wide open. There are teams on the prowl. Napoli and Juventus are there. Roma and Milan seem to be fading away. And in the middle of all this, you have sides like Fiorentina who are just not giving up. Paulo Sousa's done well. I want to conclude today's show by talking about the table in general and some surprises, because the Serie A table is right now, it's very different from last year. Teams like Genoa, Sampdoria, who crusaded into the top 7, are out of the picture. And this is also including Lazio. They are out of the picture for now. So who is in the top 10 that can make a European chase, who I believe they could make a European chase at about the midway point of the season, who you not expect? Well, let's look no further than Sassuolo. They beat Juventus at home. They're currently 3 points behind Roma for that last place, for 5th place in the Europa League. You got Atalanta, who have completely revived themselves from near relegation to a few points off Sassuolo and Roma. You have Empoli, another sensation who many predicted to be down in Serie B. Without Maurizio Sarri, they have done just fine. Then you have Torino and Chievo Verona tied for 10th place. A lot of these smaller clubs are challenging the big sides and trying to make runs to the top 10. This Serie A campaign has been very interesting. We've seen some upsets. We've seen some teams start off strong and begin to fade away. Roma comes to mind with that. This weekend, there are some big clashes that I think you all need to know about. One of them, the only game tomorrow on Saturday, is not one of them. It's Bologna versus Empoli. For a Saturday game, I don't understand why Serie A did that one. They decided that the primetime Saturday night game should be Bologna-Empoli. On Sunday, you have at the early game, the noon Italian time game is Juventus-Carpi. Fiorentina take on Chievo Verona. Later that day, you have AS Roma taking on Genoa and Napoli taking on Atalanta. The big game of the weekend, though, is the Sunday night game, Inter versus Lazio at the San Siro. My prediction for the weekend game, I think you're going to see Inter continue to shine atop Serie A. I think we see Milan pick up a few more points. I don't really see any of the top 5 sides slipping. I think all the top 5 teams go on to claim 3 points. That is it, folks, for the very first episode of IFD Radio. We'll be back on Monday to discuss the weekend's wrap up the weekend's action. We're getting close to the Mercato time, and a lot is going to be going on between now and the end of January. But I hope you all enjoyed the pilot. I look forward to having you all on Monday. Have a great day and have a great weekend. Ciao.